Our guest today is a published author, award-winning writer of a master thesis on Bitcoin, and part of the winning team of the world's largest hackathon. We'll be talking about the emerging token economy, where is the value of cryptocurrencies, and the often neglected use case of the blockchain technology that will disrupt the way corporations and even governments operate in the future. Now let's welcome Jean-Luc Verhelst. So hello, Jean-Luc, and thank you very much for being here. Welcome to the Online Crypto Summit.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Could you share with us a little bit about your background and how are you currently involved into the blockchain and crypto world?
Sure. I've discovered Bitcoin actually, like most of the people, a couple of years ago when I was writing a master thesis for university. So my thesis was entirely focused on Bitcoin and what it actually was. So trying to discover what it was and whether it was a valid cryptocurrency or currency or not. I was very first skeptic at the beginning, but then the more I got to understand the technology behind it, the more I became very convinced that this will be the future of money. So that's how I came involved into the space. Now, what I'm doing today is, well, first I'm the author of a book, which is Bitcoin, the Blockchain, and Beyond. I'm also giving lots of keynotes and doing trainings. Trainings are coming up as well. One of them in Silicon Valley and at Google, so I'm looking very forward to that. I'm also working for Deloitte as a consultant, entirely on blockchain as well. And I'm also the co-founder of a blockchain community here in Belgium. We have a couple hundred of people that we try to organize so that everybody finds what he's looking for in the crypto space.
Very nice. Thank you for sharing that. So let's start with a quick review of how tokens and coins are different. And could you explain why is it important to make that distinction?
Sure. I think coins, when we refer to coins, we refer about money in what we would like to say the real world, meaning what's still mainstream today. And that's basically paper money, which, is nothing else than paper money. So we collectively believe that these coins or these notes are worth something, and they're all issued by a central bank. Tokens are different, not necessarily because they're not issued by a central party. Of course, there's that aspect, but there are different types of tokens. You have tokens with which you can buy things, which are what we call cryptocurrencies, and you have tokens which are crypto securities that are aimed at having a voting right in a decentralized autonomous organization, for example, or in other type of application it might be. And then you have utility tokens, which are used within an application. Ether, for example, can be considered as a utility token because it is used to actually keep the smart contracts running. It's a gasoline for the smart contracts. Now, how is that different from the current coin system? Well, it is first not issued by one central person. It is issued via a protocol, so it's completely virtual. These tokens, they are transferred from one to another, ideally via blockchain most of the time, sometimes on exchanges. So the big difference lays in the fact that in coin system, or let's say in the old currency system, these are issued and managed by one person. In the tokens, usually the rules to issue the tokens are also pre-programmed in the blockchain.
So can you talk a bit about that emerging token economy? What do we mean by that when we say, what do we mean by that term, and how it will change the world as we know it if it keeps growing with this pace?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. What's essential to understand in the token economy is that every token can represent something differently. It can represent a bottle of water. I'm not sure that actually makes a lot of sense, but that could be a case. It could be, you could maybe redeem a certain token for a certain taxi ride, and so on and so on. Now, all of these tokens, they might have different utilities, and they might be used in different cases. Now, the fact that you have a token for every different application means that all of these tokens will have an exchange rate against each other. So today, if you have a euro, you still have a euro. And if someone prices a taxi ride in euros, and he says, okay, a taxi ride of 5 miles is 10 euros, for example, well, you will have to pay 10 euros for these 5 miles. But it might very well be that in a couple of months of now, this 5 miles or in a couple of hours from now, depending on the traffic, depending on the demand, these 5 miles might be worth less or more than 10 euros. So there's a demand that is and a supply that is continuously fluctuating depending on a geographic region as well. And the token economy is exactly that. The token economy will have fluctuating exchanging rate all the time, and so you will maybe be able to exchange 5 taxi coins for 3 bottle coins, because at that point of time, that's the value these two compare. Of course, it's very difficult to keep track of all of these exchange rates, and that's why historically we actually moved to a central currency that was underlying all of this. So we might have some of these tokens that serve as an underlying layer to transfer between all of these different tokens that have a different utility.
So will that be Bitcoin, for example, or maybe any other major cryptocurrency existing?
It could be Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin nowadays is a very unique cryptocurrency. It was mainly because it was the first one, but also because everybody speaks about it. Is it the best cryptocurrency? I don't know. It has a limited supply, so which makes it kind of something scarce, which means that people tend to hold on it because in theory, economical theory, the value should keep increasing of Bitcoins. Now, of course, is that the best way to have an economy? I don't know. I think there will always be a couple of cryptocurrencies that aim at being this underlying mean of exchange, and there will always be a top 10 of them that will be used quite frequently. In economic theory, what people say as well is that people tend to use the bad currency first, which means that if you have a currency like, I don't know, I'm just saying something, I know they changed a couple of years ago. If you will have Zimbabwean dollars and euros, you will first exchange your Zimbabwean dollars because you would know that they would decrease in value much faster than the euro, and you will keep your euros. So you might see something like that as well in the cryptocurrency space. So you have a couple of major cryptocurrencies, but you tend to spend those that you think will be worth less in the future.
So what do you think of the following statement from an author in a very popular tech blog? He's saying that the true power of cryptocurrencies is the power to print and distribute money without a central authority. Would you agree with that? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's true. Although I would like to say that the true power of cryptocurrencies is not the power to print and distribute, it's the power to program how much will be printed and distributed without a central authority. So I think indeed that's the great power of cryptocurrencies. Now, besides that, you can also create multiple cryptocurrencies. So it still remains all about in which cryptocurrency will we believe. You can create a cryptocurrency, I can create a cryptocurrency, but if people believe in you, in your cryptocurrency, not in mine, yes, I create something new, but it doesn't have any effect. So it is, but let's imagine that people tend to believe me and tend to follow my cryptocurrency as well. Then you have suddenly a new mass of wealth that is created next to yours. So I think it is true, and it's up to everybody to actually look into the rules of the cryptocurrency, look into the rules of the supply, the network that is behind it, the ecosystem that is built around it, to see in which one you believe. At least things are becoming transparent now in terms of supply. I would like to add on that. I think it's nice to have a quote that starts with the true power of cryptocurrencies or is something. I think the true power of cryptocurrency is also the fact that everybody can create his own currency today. Just like internet made it possible for everybody to create his own information or his own content. Before that, it was all filtered by the news and TV and the media stations. And then internet came along, made it possible for anyone to create any type of content and spread it to anyone else. I think that's the true power of cryptocurrencies, is that today you no longer rely on central bank that's going to impose you a certain currency. It makes it possible for you to create your own currency, and if it's well designed enough and people believe in it enough, it might become a mainstream cryptocurrency. I think that's one of the true power of cryptocurrencies as well, and especially the fact that it does not rely on a central authority, and that's where this quote is again very usable. The number of coins that will be issued is stated. It is clear. If I have, for example, if I have 1 Bitcoin today, I know I have 1/21 millionth of the economy. If I have €1 million today, I don't have any idea of how much I will have in the economy today. let alone tomorrow, because they might print much more. So it's very intransparent, the current system. Yeah.
Well, speaking of that, at the same time, I read that 96% of all Bitcoins are owned by just 4% of the addresses. So isn't that a step away from decentralization?
Yes, I'm not sure how reliable these numbers are, but it is indeed the case that that there is a lot of centralization, and there are a lot of big players who own a large majority of the coins. I don't know about the exact numbers, but it is certainly an issue. And I think where the issue comes is that well, you need to make a distinction. There is a decentralization in the way the rules are set up, which means that even if you have all of that wealth, you cannot necessarily change the rules. So the monetary policy of the Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies remain.
They still control the money supply in a way.
Not really. The miners are controlling the money supply, so they keep. Oh, sorry. What's your question? There is still a control on the monetary supply, or do they control the monetary supply?
Yeah, if there are just few people owning the total supply of Bitcoins, it's very easy for them to speculate and to affect the market.
Yeah, so I'm coming back to my distinction where you need to make a distinction between the rules of the blockchain, which is the number of Bitcoins that will be supplied. Even if they own all that wealth, they cannot necessarily change the rules. These are backed by the 10,000s of people and miners in the ecosystem. Where they do have an effect, and that's where you come, what you're saying is truth, it's on the speculative aspect. Meaning if you have a lot of money, you can kind of do market manipulation. And that's where indeed there is an issue when it comes down to the distribution of Bitcoin, because they could actually manipulate the market. And then again, if the end game is to have a lot of euros or a lot of dollars, this is an important element that comes into play. This is also why I'm thinking that a good design currency, but that's a more philosophical and personal point of view, is a cryptocurrency in which the protocol, where the rules actually state a redistribution mechanism, where of course there are a couple of steps that needs to be done to get there. First is having a unique blockchain identifier. But assuming that we will maybe get there with things like self-sovereign identity, and you can really make sure that there's only one identifier per person, you can actually have a protocol that actually also redistributes the coins and says, okay, it's 10% of all the coins that go back to a central pot, and we redistribute that amongst everyone in the community. It's kind of a universal basic income. But of course, it's not so easy to set it up. But I think it would be nice to see this type of protocols coming in, which still means that the rich people, they can keep getting rich as long as they provide a service and that people are redistributing or paying something to them for something they're doing.
Can we maybe go a step back and explain what you mean by universal identifier?
Yes, so the universal identifier will be basically a blockchain identity. So nowadays there is no standard around what would be a blockchain identity. There is the idea that blockchain can give you more control back over your data and over your identity. If you think about it today, mainly your identity is owned by the big players in the at least your digital identity is owned by the big players like Facebook, Gmail, or your Google account, etc. Which is something lots of people, especially in Europe, are a bit scared of, you know.
Well, it is scary.
Yeah, these big American firms that own your data, and you don't really know what they're doing with it and how it might affect you in the future.
And they can wipe it out anytime. So.
Right. Where blockchain comes in is the idea that you have your data. You don't store your data on the blockchain, but you can prove that the data you're providing to whoever needs your data and you're giving it to them is actually the authentic data. So let's take an example. One of the examples I take in the book is if you, for example, you're on the highway and you're stopped by a policeman. The policeman asks for your driver license. Today you give him your driver license, but on the same time you're also giving him away your date of birth, your name, your first name, your last name, and some other information that he's not necessarily supposed to know. The only thing he's supposed to know is that you can drive a car, and that's it. What blockchain will make possible is, for example, I have my blockchain identity, and in the blockchain identity I have a record that says that I can drive a car, and only when and that's, for example, endorsed by someone who can issue me this type of records. And only when I meet the policeman, I'm actually showing him look, I have the piece of data that actually shows that I can drive a car, and I'm the same person as the person to which that is linked on the blockchain, and I can prove that without having to show anything else about me. And of course, getting there is not easy, because today you could easily create multiple identities on the blockchain. So there is some work that needs to be done there. And it will probably rely again on central institutions that will have a different role than today. But hopefully we will manage to get a, well, I don't know if it's good or bad. I think there are negative aspects as well, because then you have one identity on the blockchain, and hopefully that never gets hacked. But it might be nice for when we speak about a universal basic income. I think if we happen to go to a universal basic income, if that's a good decision, I'm in no way an economist, and I'm in no way saying that this is the way we should go to, but I think there's a future there. Then blockchain is the perfect tool to implement it if we have a good identity system. I must say as well, having the big issue to have a good identity system is, on one hand, having this unique identity, and on the other hand, people should trust themselves enough to manage their own identity. And this might think, and I like to quote Spielman always saying, with great power comes great responsibility. It's a great power to have your own identity, but you are responsible of it as well. And to what does that come down in the facts? It's your private key. If you lose your private key, it's like using the big password to your identity, you're losing your identity. So there again, how are you going to manage that issue of losing your private key? And I think that's also one of the big issues today, to go to a decentralized identity.
And it can still be hacked as well. That's also a major threat, especially when talking about identities.
Absolutely. I think private keys can be stolen. Identities can be forged. I think when we speak about digital identities, we should also look more and more into the different things than just a password or private key, but is that person at the right location where he's supposed to be? And all of these things based on geolocalization, on different things that are unique to my body, and then the way I speak, the way I behave, and etc. But there again, it looks a bit scary that we need to know all of these things to be able to identify something. So I'm not sure that's a course we want to go either. What I do see is that technology makes it more and more possible.
I think China is going in that course with their new social rating system. It's a bit crazy though.
I don't know all of the details of the rating system they're putting into place. It reminds me of a Black Mirror episode, which I think is quite scary. But yeah, let's see how it comes. But what people tend to forget as well is that you do have a choice. It's okay, there is a rating system into place, but if no one starts to accept it, it's never going to see the day. I mean, if you look at the thing in Black Mirror, for example, it is quite funny to see that almost all the episodes of Black Mirror, people have consequences of the technology, but they never actually show that people can say stop, they can stop using it, they can rebel themselves against it. And I think the day that my phone becomes a real threat on my life, I mean, okay, today maybe they listen to me and they watch me and so on, but it's not a real threat on my life. If you want to listen and watch me, well, go ahead. I mean, I don't really care. But the day it becomes a real threat of my life, I'm hoping that I will be able to throw away my phone, because that's still a choice I have.
Well, the way they do it though, they give you the social rankings based on different interactions, and you are restricted to receive different services if you don't get the ranking. So that in a way, it already affects your life if you're not inside the system. So you're kind of forced to be into that system.
And is that the case only for governmental services, or is that for any type of services?
It's for any type. They have that like one app for everything, and it's also connected to the government wants to use the data as well. So there are speculations that they may use it for censorship as well of free speech, like drop your rating if you say certain words on the internet. So yeah, it's.
It is scary. Do you have any idea if this is already? If they can already download the app and
oh yeah, it is working.
And how many people are actually using that? How many people are installing it?
I'm not sure of the numbers, but I've read a really thorough article about it. I can send it to you if you're interested on the
Absolutely.
topic. The article was written by a person using the app already and explaining his experiences. So it was really crazy to learn about that.
It is scary, especially because in this case, it's a central party being the public administration of China that in the end
Exactly.
owns the game and
The
that,
emperor gets you.
well, I'm not even sure it's incentivizing you or forcing you to have or to adopt a certain behavior. What blockchain does as well is incentivizing you to get a certain behavior by giving you tokens, and we all want to collect these tokens. We're gonna incentivize ourselves to we're gonna adapt ourselves to get a certain behavior to get these tokens, which is in a certain sense also manipulating people. But when it comes from a central administration, it's it's just much more scary because it's not really incentivizing. It's in the end forcing you to have a certain behavior to be able to be granted access to certain services. And in the end, it's centrally managed, which means that if there's someone who's managing the app or the database that doesn't like you, he can change your records, and how are you going to prove the opposite? Yeah?
Yeah. And also they say that your rating depends on the rating of your friends. So that's really creating this classes of people who are discriminated and people who have access to everything. And the question really is how you move back to where you were. So maybe can we talk next a bit about what decentralized autonomous organization is? That sounds really cool, and I would like to learn how it operates. What is it and how it operates on the blockchain?
Sure. So I think decentralized autonomous organization is something we're going to keep talking about in the coming years. It has it has become a bit less apparent in the last year because of the ICOs. But what a decentralized autonomous look, what blockchain makes possible on one hand is to transfer value of cryptocurrencies from one person to the other. And it allows the second thing, which is to create smart contracts. A smart contract is a contract that you put on the blockchain where you set the rules of the contracts and you're sure that it's going to execute. This smart contract can also include some of the currency. So you give the currency, the cryptocurrency, to the smart contract, and the smart contract owns it and then decides who gets it based on who wins the bet, for example. And if you think about decentralizing or at least reinventing the way currency works, and you think about reinventing the way a contract works, you can reinvent the way the governance of a company is working. And that's what a decentralized autonomous organization is. It's an organization in which the governance of the company is set into smart contracts, and the money flows of this company is also set into the governance system, so into these smart contracts. Now, it is quite complex. It's usually 10,000s of lines of codes working together if you go to more advanced DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, which means it's also quite difficult to implement and to make sure that they run the way they were intended to run. But I think it is quite an interesting tool that we will see more often. So to give a bit more of a concrete example, there has been DDAO. It's a bit of an old case, the first decentralized autonomous organization. But I still like to give that example because it does show how fantastic it could be to have a DAO versus how difficult it can be as well to have one that is running properly. So what was the DAO? That was a decentralized venture capital fund, which was basically a set of smart contracts that say for 30 days you can send your cryptocurrency over to the contract, and in return you will get voting tokens, so crypto securities, if you can say it that way. And the contract keep collecting money for 1 month for these 30 days, and then at the end of the month it received 150 million worth of Ether at that point of time. So it was a huge crowdfunding. I mean, it's not funny now when we speak about $150 million as what people collect on the blockchain, but that was the biggest crowdfunding at that point of time. And the idea was that, okay, you have a pot of money now, and someone has a blockchain project or any other type of project and wants to actually get a part of the money. I'm saying something. Someone wants to, for example, I don't know, write a book, and you want to get 10,000 euros out of that pot to write your book. So you needed to submit a proposal, and you would say, for example, for every book I'm selling, there's 10% that goes back to this venture capital fund. So you give me 10,000 euros now, but hopefully you trust that I'm good in selling the book and so on, and so you will get your money back. And the way this decision was taken to whether or not invest into someone or into a specific project was taken collectively by all the people who invested their money in the DAO. So if I invested a lot of money, I received a lot of voting tokens, and I could actually direct a bit across of whether or not this project will be accepted. So I think conceptually it was a great smart contract, a great DAO, great initiative led by very brilliant people. The only thing is there was someone who was smarter than anybody else, and there was one line of code which could have been interpreted in a way that was not expected from when the contract was released. And someone ran away with 60 million of Ether at that point of time. So it's and the funny thing. Sorry.
And this is a sad ending of the story.
This is a sad ending of the story. And the funny thing is, because we all agreed that the code is law, that we were supposed to review it, and we all knew that okay, you cannot change the contract because it's in the blockchain, and the blockchain is secure. You can't change things in there. Well, we all lost our money. It ended up in a huge debate, and there has been a fork, and that's another question. But the point here is that it's nice to create this DAO, but the more complex they are, the more prone to error they are. So we need to be very careful on how we design them. This being said, I really believe they have a future. If you think about what's happening in the ICO space today, it's much, much worse. I think 98% of the ICOs will fail. And why is that? ICOs are basically the same thing as the DAO, but without this governance layer. So it's a smart contract that says, I have a nice project, I'm collecting money, send it over to me, but you don't get any specific vote tokens, or not always vote tokens on what's going to happen with this money. And I can just have from one day to the other 200 million, and then I don't know about you, but if I get 200 million with a nice idea, I still have to implement it. I'm probably going to take 2 weeks of vacation. So the fact that there is in the current ICOs not really a governance in the way the money will be spent, so the money is not blocked on the blockchain, it's just given to someone, I think is a big issue. And I think that's why we will see lots of these projects fail. And I think there again, the future of raising money on a blockchain will be through a decentralized autonomous organization, where you will avoid that the money, okay, if for example the 2 founders of a project, they don't get along anymore and the project fails, well, it's fine. The money still is in a smart contract, and you can claim it back. So let's take a concrete example. People, they raise 200 million. Okay, it's nice, you raise 200 million, but we will decide that for the first year, you can only spend maybe 5 million out of these 200 million. If after 1 year, we're still very happy about the work you're doing and you're well on track in your roadmap, we're going to release more money for you. If you're not on track on the roadmap, we have the power to actually claim the money, the remaining money back, and send it back to the different people who invested into it. And I think that's going to be a much more sustainable way to raise money on the blockchain in the future. So wait for it, but DAOs will come back.
So in a way, what you're saying is that ICOs will give rights to the people who invest in them to take part in the decision making regarding how the money is spent.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's going to be the case for quite a lot of these ICOs, or as we would call them then, decentralized autonomous initial coin offerings, so DICOs, which is a combination of an ICO with a governance layer with a DAO. Nice term invented by Vitalik himself. And I think the space needed a term like that to actually understand what it is about. So I think we will see much more of that. This being said, I still believe there will be ICOs like we're doing them today, which are very centralized. I can imagine that maybe one day there will be a pharma company that has a vaccine, or that wants to work on a certain vaccine, and they don't get the fund necessarily by the institutional investors today, but lots of people have the disease, so they're willing to give the money to that firm, and they trust that the pharma company is going to do a good job in the research and so on. And that might be a completely centralized ICO, but that still serves a certain purpose. So it's again all about trust. The trust is essential. Do you trust the person you're giving your money to? If it's a big pharma firm, maybe you will. If it's a random guy you don't know, but which might be very smart, well, you will probably ask to be part of the governance system. Yeah.
So, what legal implications that would have, though, for investors if they also get voting rights? How?
So I'm not a specialist from a legal point of view, but
Okay.
from what I do understand is as soon as you issue voting rights, you issue what is called a security. And so your token becomes a security and means that it falls under the regulation of securities, which is kind of a tricky thing because, of course, security in the US is not exactly the same as a security in Europe. So how do you cope with that? I don't know. I know that there are some states that are more favorable than others. I know the US has heavily regulated securities, for example, and then everything that is a voting token on the blockchain that does become a security falls under that regulation, which means that a lot of ICOs also say we do not accept any US investors. I think that from the US point of view is well, it's maybe a decent choice and makes some sense from a legal point of view. But on the other hand, also cuts a good part of the innovation from the US and brings it to other continents. So yeah, the legal implications are quite unclear today. And I think that the more we will move forward, the more we will have regulators that understand the difference between all of these tokens, and that hopefully will not regulate them too strong, too fast, so that the innovation can keep going.
So do you see that governance model penetrating anytime soon into traditional organizations and corporations? How efficient would that be for the dinosaurs, if I can call them that way?
Yeah, I think there are still a few steps between the very traditional way of organizing a company versus the DAO way. The DAO way is really the extreme. But I would hope that there is more like, and in between you have things like quite flat organizations, you have agile methodologies, you have holacracy, and those kind of things. I think we will more and more move to holacracy organizational system. So that's basically a system in which everybody has a certain role and has a certain responsibility, and within that responsibility, he's free to act quite fast and take decisions because he's entitled to do so. While in a very traditional company, you'll still have to review, and in the end, all the power is concentrated on the top. So it's already a much more flat structure. I think decentralized autonomous organizations are still one step further in the sense that everything is encoded, which also means that you might lose some flexibility in there. So I'm not sure it's going to be implemented very fast into the big traditional companies. I think it's also not suitable for certain companies. But I think that when we speak about companies that are run digitally, that are run online, this will become quite a good way to run a company with people you don't necessarily know, with people who move, with people you never met, which is going to be which is a growing trend, and which is going to continue being a growing trend. I think these online companies with multiple profiles working together online will more and more go to decentralized autonomous organizations to set their governance, knowing that it will not be able to solve all the issues because, of course, sometimes you need some human judgment, but then you can't foresee that the human judgment is taken by a specific person in the DAO. And that person can be elected by something that is a bit more based on voting rights again.
Well, I guess you can delegate some of the voting rights to certain people in the systems.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, as we are coming to a close, would you like to share how do you see the future of blockchain and cryptocurrencies?
Interesting question. Well, I think we knew quite a hype in the last couple of weeks, months. I think the focus is going to be back on what can you really do with it, and the greed is going to disappear, which is something I do like to see. I think the future is bright. I think we're going to see much more interesting things happening. Cryptocurrencies are here to stay. At least the technology is here to stay. I think one day we will see central banks adopting the same technology for their currency. It will still be, and that's what they call digital currencies. It will still be very centralized cryptocurrencies, but they will work the same way, which means that you can put them in an easy way in your accounting system, which means that you can put them in smart contracts and you can benefit from all the efficiencies that blockchain has to offer besides cryptocurrencies, because it's much more than just cryptocurrencies alone. But if you move on to digital currencies, so state issued cryptocurrencies, well, you of course lose one of the big advantages and the initial philosophy of the blockchain, which is to be decentralized in its governance, in the monetary policy. So I think both will coexist. I think there will always be people. My grandmother will always believe in the state and the euros that she sees. A geek like me might trust much more cryptocurrency. So, and as time evolves, people will shift from one to the other. But I think cryptocurrencies are here to stay, and blockchain application will have. I think they will really streamline the way businesses work, and hopefully they will. If we find the right tools, and if we manage to solve a couple of governance issues around identity, for example, they might bring a better democracy in the end as well, a more liquid democracy.
What do you mean by liquid democracy? If we can close with that.
Yeah, sure. So liquid democracy is the idea that if we all have our blockchain identity, for example, and I'm not necessarily very involved into politics, but I trust you, and I think you know everything about the economy, and the economy or the environment is very important for me. So I'm going to delegate my vote to you, and then you delegate maybe your vote to someone else, which you believe it.
But that's on a certain topic, not on.
It could be on a certain topic, or it could be general. You could imagine different tokens, one token for topic, one token for environment, one token for the economy, and so on, and you delegate that to the person that you want to represent you around that topic. And then if you're not happy with that person, you can claim it back. So which is a very cool thing to do, which will give, like, today, like in my country, for example, we go to elections every 4 years if the government is still alive at that point of time, which is most often the case, but sometimes tend to have some issues. But that means that once every 4 years, we have some sort of say into what will happen. And then they come together and they decide what's going to be the majority, what's going to be the opposition, and then that's it. We're done for 4 years. But in a liquid democracy, you will have much more control, and you will be able to claim things back and to change opinions, and maybe to redistribute your coin to someone else if the agenda changes around the environment, for example. And it will hold basically politicians much more accountable for the work they're doing, and to make sure that they represent what the people say. So I think it would be a powerful tool to have that, and blockchain is one of the tools that allow it. Of course, we need to be careful as well, because if you have a completely liquid democracy in which you can claim your coin or your token back, your voting token back at any point of time, you might see that at certain events, like, I don't know, there's a shooting in a school, or there are terrorists coming in, that you go to for radical solution or emotionally based solutions, and you might say, for example, okay, if there's a terrorist attack in Brussels, people in Belgium might all say, oh, now we need to put all of the people from a certain country out of the country, which is also a very radical and very emotional based decision. So you need to be careful about these tools as well. Having a liquid democracy is interesting, but we need to kind of safeguard ourselves against our own emotions and fast reactions we might have, because sometimes it's good to think a bit things through and to take a couple of days. So we might have to program that into that as well, that there is a delay before you can claim a token back. But yeah, I think it's a nice idea, and I don't know if it will ever see the case. I think identity is a big issue to solve before, but it will be interesting to have more transparency and accountability in politics as well.
I think we're getting there, and even faster than I initially thought. So cool. It looks really promising.
So can you share us a bit what? And I know I'm not asking you the questions, but why you think it's coming faster than what we think?
Because a few years ago, with my partner, we started a project that was based on creating a platform for collaboration and direct democracy. So this was 5 years ago, just before, a couple of years before Ethereum. So there was not really a technological foundation for it to happen. So now, 5 years later, I see how all of this that we kind of brainstormed and imagined, if you wish, because it was at that level, it is already happening with the technology, and this is just 5 years since then. And for me, this is a really, really fast development. And
yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I think
it's very subjective, but it's the way I see it.
It is impressive to see how fast these things are evolving. I know that every prediction I ever made came to realization 2 or 3 times faster than what I expected. If you think about it, Ethereum is 2 or 3 years old. It's super recent. I mean, sometimes we are frustrated, like, okay, there's still that to do, there's still that to do, there are still these milestones to reach in the technology before we can really do all of these things. But on the other hand, if you look at everything that has been achieved in the last 2 or 3 years, it's incredibly fast.
Yeah, and also I read just the other day that Dubai, they have this smart city project, and they are already talking about incorporating the blockchain into their government system. It's very centralized, and they kind of ban anything else, but still they're open to incorporate it and to give it a try.
I think it's interesting what's happening in Dubai, because they indeed have this big priority around smart cities and this other big priority about we want to put our government on a blockchain, as if that should be the most prior thing to do by a government. I think it's quite funny. But blockchain kind of helps in there as well, because you will have smart cities with a lot of sensors and sensor data that will become available. That might be resold, and we have a Belgian firm that is working around that with a blockchain solution, which is called Data Broker DAO, which is all about making sure that the data from this sensor is actually that you can authenticate them, and then when you sell them to other parties, you're sure that this data first becomes available and people see that this data is available and they can actually buy it, but also that it is actually authentic data. And if it's not authentic data, that you can kind of claim things back, because there's a certain staking mechanism in the way that the tokens will be transferred. So I think it's interesting to see that Dubai is so open to everything, and I think blockchain has a big role to play in ensuring that that all the data is correct and authentic and transferred the right way. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Would you like to share anything else before we close?
No, I think it was a great talk, very much focused about cryptocurrencies and the potential and their true power. I think it is very interesting, and no, I have nothing else to share than saying that I'm looking forward to everything that's coming up, and that I think it's important that people keep educating themselves on everything that is happening, yes. And not just believe a hype or believe an idea, but actually try to understand the technical stuff, and try to read through things, and that we manage to actually understand what we're reading, and actually understand also the technical aspects of it and the inner workings of things, and educating yourself on it is super important.
Yeah.
And there's a book for this.
Yeah, well, thank you again for being here, because this is what we are trying to achieve with this format. Exactly, to bring mainstream awareness and education to people, because it's changing so fast that if you don't start educating yourself today, you will have a lot to catch up in just few years.
Absolutely. So thank you very much for having me.